Thank you for tuning in to the inaugural episode of the Kyle Steele Show. We are recording this for RTF Sports. This is on the, of course, Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network. Please check out all the other shows, to include the new ones that are going to be aired on the RTF Sports Network. You got the MMA Takeover show twice a week on Mondays and Fridays. You got my show on Tuesdays. You got Off the Cuff on Wednesdays. And then on Thursday, you have Early Stoppage. All great shows. Additional shows on the network. You have the Not Safe for Work MMA show, which is kind of what it sounds like. You have Between the Links, which is a game show. You have the breakdown each week. You have recaps. The network is chock full of stuff. Please, please, please check out all the podcasts that are on the Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network. Subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, wherever you listen to a podcast. You can probably find ours. So please do so. And again, I want to thank you for tuning in.
You've got a gun, got a big gun, got a gun. It's not a real one, and all you ever think about is running away. All you ever think about is trying to stay away. Stay away from me.
All right. Again, this is the inaugural episode of the Kyle Steele Show on the Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network. I am on, if you want to hear more of me, I'm on the Not Safe for Work MMA show with Fred Kirby. I'm also on Off the Cuff each week. That show is with Craig Allen and Mike Heck. So, again, if you want to see more of me, hear more of me or whatever, tune in there. This will be a free-form show. I sometimes will have interviews. I will sometimes have guests, both in person or remotely. Free form. I don't know exactly what to be honest, I don't know what I'm going to talk about right now. I have one topic, and we'll see kind of where that goes. I've always enjoyed doing that kind of a show. I don't like planning. I feel like planning is counterproductive for conversation. I like to just go in and see where the conversation goes. I'm a big fan of that. And I can always, of course, pause, and you'll have no idea if I need to collect my thoughts. But I do have one topic here, and I want to take this into the break. We'll be taking a break at 15 minutes. So I do want to talk about this real quick. So UFC 245, and yes, I am saying 245, not 246. We are living in a post-UFC 246 world, which I will talk about. But before I get to UFC 246, I want to talk about UFC 245 real quick, okay? Let me refresh your memory. On December 14th, 2019, a fight card took place. It was UFC 245. It had quite a bit of hype behind it for a couple different reasons. One, you had 3 title fights. Okay, you had Amanda Nunes fighting Durandamine for the second time. You had Holloway versus Volkanovski. You had Usman Covington. Okay, that takes you to the second reason why this was a highly anticipated card. Usman Covington, right? There's a lot of bad blood there. Covington's whole shtick with Trump. You got Usman the immigrant, right? It was a perfect storm, those two getting together, okay? But on top of that, again, you had 3 title fights. None of them interim, by the way. Normally, when the UFC is trying to throw together multiple title fights, there's like an interim thing thrown in there. Not recently. This year's been pretty good. Last year's been pretty good. Well, this year we're only like 20 days in. But you know what I mean? This cycle. So, going back a few months, 4, 5, 6 months, we haven't had as many interim stuff. It seemed like 2018 was just the year of interim. There was interims everywhere. No interims here though. Okay, this was 3. And I would say legitimate title fights. 170 is probably the most exciting division in the UFC right now. You had Holloway fighting Volkanovski. Holloway has been kind of the new godfather there at featherweight. Some people calling him, he beat Aldo twice, but he also beat Aldo later in his career. But I think some people considering maybe Holloway is the greatest featherweight ever. But he's got to get through a guy like Volkanovski, right? Which obviously didn't end up happening. But that's just to say a lot of hype behind Holloway. And for good reason. For good reason, a lot of hype behind Holloway. But Volkanovski, at the time we all knew, okay, this is a guy who has a lot to offer here. And if anyone can beat Holloway, it's this guy, right? So, again, all this to say, just tons of hype, okay? It takes place at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. And I want you to remember that for a second, okay? Just lock that into your brain, Okay, UFC 245 took place at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas on December 14th. 3 title fights. And, oh, yeah, the other 2 fights in the main card, one involved Aldo and one involved Uriah Faber. So not only you got the power of the 3 title fights, you got that as well. Okay, so let me give you the live gate and the attendance. Okay, live gate and the attendance. We don't have the pay-per-view buy rate yet, but it's irrelevant anyway. We got the ticket revenue and we got attendance, okay? Ticket revenue, $4,041,119. Okay? So just over $4 million. Attendance, 16,811. This is at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas on December 14th. Okay, lock that into your brain. Let's get to UFC 246. So UFC 246 took place on January 18th, so just over 30 days after UFC 245. It also took place at T-Mobile Arena, okay, in Las Vegas. The fight card itself, you have Conor McGregor, of course, at the helm. Other than that, not a whole lot. If you want to call Holly Holm a draw, then you had Holly Holm as the second fight. But the other fights in the main card was Diego Ferreira, Anthony Pettis, which, again, Anthony Pettis, no shine away from there, but I don't think he's carrying what he used to carry, obviously. Brian Kelleher versus Ode Osborne, who I believe was making his debut in the UFC. You had Alexei Olenek fighting Maurice Green, and then the aforementioned Raquel Pennington, which was a rematch from a fight early in Holly Holm's career, or early in her UFC career, I should say. So that's the rest of the card. I mean, obviously, when comparing that card to UFC 245, it's not even close, right? It's not even close to being what UFC 245 is as far as the rest of the card is concerned. The big thing was Conor McGregor, right? And the Conor McGregor factor. Now, if you're like me, you thought that maybe some of the shine had been taken away from Conor McGregor, right? He's coming off a loss in the UFC with Khabib Nurmagomedov, right? Before that, he fights outside of the UFC. It takes some time off before that, and then takes quite a bit of time off before fighting Habib last year, right? But before Habib, he loses to Mayweather. It's a big fight. It's a marquee fight, but he still loses, okay? So I'm thinking some shine's been taken away. Fans who were a big Conor McGregor fan prior to, I would say, the second Nate Diaz fight, right? People who are fans of his prior to the second Nate Diaz fight have now wavered, It's now become the hardcore thing to do. The more of a hardcore fan you are, the more you hate Conor McGregor, right? It just seems to be, I don't know why that is. I don't hate Conor McGregor. I'm a big fan of Conor McGregor. I think he might be turning some people back around. I understand he's overhyped. I get all that, but the dislike for him and the unwillingness, and I need to make sure I phrase this correctly, but, he's been accused of sexual assault, but absolutely nothing has taken place. There have been no charges. There have been no, from what I even hear, even the interviews with police have not happened. That was made up or was a something that was misconstrued. He's being interviewed about something else. So we really have nothing. I don't even think there's even been a public statement from the accuser, even in anonymity. So we really have nothing to go off of. So this isn't to excuse the potential action, but if you have nothing to go off of, what are you supposed to do here? You can't vilify someone if you got nothing to vilify him with. I am an avid believer, and I say this all the time, and I understand this is not my phrase, but I do say it all the time, and where there's smoke, there's fire, right? I think he's been accused more than once of sexual assault. There's a reason why, say, Colby Covington, who everybody hates, he's not getting accused of sexual assault, right? even other players at 170. Let's go to 170, right? Or 155. Nate Diaz isn't being accused of sexual assault, right? Those are big names, and they're not being accused of it either. McGregor's name is bigger, I understand that, but still, those are also big names and people that aren't have a cult dislike as much as they have a cult like, and no one's accusing them of sexual assault. So again, where there's smoke, there's fire. There's a very, very, I would say more likely than not that Conor McGregor did sexually assault someone, but we also have nothing to go off of. So I understand that's where a lot of the hate is coming from. But they also just seem to hate him, right? They just don't like the fact that he's dominated the sport the way he has. They don't like that his name is elevated above all. They think it's overblown. They think he's overblown. He won't defend. He holds up divisions, right? They just don't like the guy. It's something that doesn't bother me, but they don't like the guy. But nobody can deny the casual reach, right? Nobody can deny that the man brings eyeballs to the sport, and no matter how much you hate him, you want to watch him fight. And I wasn't sure. I wasn't so sure that a lot of that shine had not gone away. Again, I'm like a lot of other people. I really was like, I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm not saying he's going to flop or anything, but I think the UFC is going to go, oh, shit, we put all of our eggs in the Conor McGregor basket on this card because we got nothing else to offer people, and this card is going to flop. Well, let me give you the numbers, okay? Like I said, this is just barely over 30 days later, 34 days later. They're back at the T-Mobile Arena. They're back in Las Vegas 34 days later. Do you remember the gate from the first one? Do you remember it? Just in case you forgot it. It was just over 4 million, okay? The gate for this one is just over 11 million. Same arena, 34 days later, nonetheless, meaning the people who were there the first time, some of those people had to pay again to come. How many UFC fans could possibly be out there, right? just over 11 million. It's almost 3 times what that card did, which was a significantly better card on paper. It just didn't have Conor McGregor. The attendance, 3,000 more people. Less bouts, worse card, 3,000 more people, and $7 more million. I mean, it's holy shit. I have no words. And not only does it pull that in, and I can't stress this enough, not only is it that much more ticket revenue, not only is the attendance that much higher, not only is the card that much worse outside the fact that Conor McGregor's on it, okay? I'm talking about the card itself. Not only is the card so much worse, it is 34 days after a big marquee card had just taken place. Old days UFC, and Keith, who may or may not be listening to this, I don't know, but I think as Keith can attest, if old UFC had tried to go back to another place 30 days later, I would have completely flopped. Other than that was the only show in town. So let me just say, let me rephrase. Had they tried to go to the same place that was away from normal, so let's just say they had a lot of the cars in Alabama or something. Or let's go with like Mohegan Sun. They didn't go to Mohegan Sun all the time. It'd be like them going to the Mohegan Sun back-to-back, 30 days apart, and you having 3 times the growth as far as the ticket revenue is concerned, and then you have an additional 3,000 people. Percentage-wise, I'm not going to do the math, but it's 3,000 more people. There's a statistic there, how many more percentage of people is there. You nerds can figure it out. The other one had 16. This had 19. Y'all can figure it out yourselves. So, but whatever that percentage is, that percentage increase to include an additional X amount of million, which, again, I don't know what percent that is. But I think it would be absolutely unheard of. There'd been no way that an old UFC card could have ever gotten that together. So, kudos to Conor McGregor. Because listen, he needs my accolades. I don't know how he's going to go on if I don't tell him congratulations. But for real, I am color me surprised. Color me surprised. We're about ready to go into our 15-minute break here. So let me just say again, thank you for supporting the show. Thank you for supporting RTF Productions, and thank you for supporting the Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network. without you guys, without you listening, this would be no fun. So I appreciate that you are listening. Tune in to the rest of the network, and I will be back right after this break. All right, we are back. I think for the second segment here, let's just get into UFC 246. There was a lot to talk about both before the fights and after the fights. In the interest of linear time, we will go before the fights, right? The big thing was Alexa Grasso. Alexa Grasso missed weight 5.5 pounds against her opponent, Claudia Gadelha. The fight winds up getting canceled. Claudia wound up accepting it at a 30% purse, but because I believe it was over 3 pounds, NSAC said no way. Or not NSAC, but what's Las Vegas? I can't remember. Doesn't matter. They said no way. We ain't letting it happen, right? And I get it. Those rules are put in place to, if you're supposed to be at a certain weight and one person is above that weight, technically they have an advantage, or at least the potential of an advantage. So I understand why the commission took the fight away. I disagree. I very much so disagree. If the one person is willing, these are two consenting adults. Now, the commission exists, so let me get this out of the way. In all this, I'm being kind of a sophist here. I'm explaining both sides and not really taking a hard stance. But, well, I am sort of. I disagree with their decision-making. But I understand why it exists. On one hand, my thing is it's two consenting adults, and two consenting adults should be able to do whatever the hell they want to do. So if they want to fight each other and the two consenting adults, then let the two consenting adults fight. The reason why the commission exists is a very similar reason to why referees exist, which is even though you are two consenting adults, because of competition and the competitive nature that especially these people have, because they are prime athletes. You know, you don't make it to the UFC by being an amateur, right? You are an elite athlete when you make it up into the UFC, so to speak. And generally speaking, that level of athlete is going to be very, very competitive. And very, very competitive people are going to put themselves in bad situations because they're not going to want to admit defeat. So the commission pulls the fight because they're concerned about the health and safety of Claudia given the weight difference at weigh-ins. Again, I disagree. I don't think that should have happened. I don't think it was fair to Claudia for sure. Alexa, whatever. You're the one that did it, so nothing, whether it's fair or not fair to you, is irrelevant. But it wasn't fair to Claudia, who did nothing wrong in this situation. But I understand why they pulled it. And I'm not going to go all in. Like I said, I disagree, but I'm not going to go all in on it. Some people are obviously very angry that the fight was taken away. And I'm saying I get it. You know, maybe it isn't safe to be in there with Alexa. You don't know. The issue with people missing weight is that you don't know why they're missing weight. You don't know if they're missing weight because they tried really, really hard and their bodies shut down, and now they're going to be depleted, which is bad for the person who missed the weight, right? Now they're going into a fight depleted, more so than they would if they just lost the weight in normal fashion, right? Or someone could miss weight because they don't care. They're like, hey, how about this? I give up 30% of my purse, and I get a W on my record against somebody that I shouldn't be able to beat, or somebody that I need to beat to get to the next level. So, hey, I won't take my weight cut nearly as seriously. I'll miss weight. I'll pay the 30%. It's kind of like you're buying yourself a win. I don't remember the statistics, obviously offhand, but there are existing statistics out there that shows that the people who miss weight generally win those fights. And to me, there's a reason for that. You're not hurting your body as much. Now, some people, when they miss weight, they're hurting their body too much. So you can obviously flip on the other side. But there is reason to believe that people have missed weight simply because they don't want to put their body through what they have to put it through, and they would rather, take the public humiliation, take the lost money, and get the W. So the commission also exists to keep that from happening. Now, 3 pounds is a lot. When the people usually miss weight, they miss by a pound, or they miss by maybe 2, right? You don't usually see people missing by 5.5. That's a huge miss. So let me get to what I would do. If I'm Claudia, I'll tell you what I'd do. And I said this on the Not Safe for Work MMA show, but I know a lot of people maybe not listen to that because, of the cursing and stuff. I think I've said one cuss word this entire time. It's a very different atmosphere. But if I'm Claudia, this is what I'm doing. I am suing the piss out of Alexa Grasso. I am suing her, and I am thinking nothing of it. I don't know if that's ever happened before where a fighter sued another fighter for missing weight. I don't know what the precedent is. I don't know what the contracts say to prohibit that from happening. I don't know if in order to do so, you got to go to arbitration. I have no idea. I have no idea how this works. But if I'm Claudia or Claudia's team, I'm trying to figure it out. I'm going, okay, what do I got to do to get compensated, not only for the potential money I missed in that fight. I was going to be on the pay-per-view. I assume there's pay-per-view points, even if there aren't pay-per-view points for her. Just the exposure she could have gotten. And I believe in most states that is a suable defense. You can say it's basically you're suing for lost wages, that you could have potential lost wages, I should say, that you are. And again, I'm just an armchair quarterback, so to speak. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Please tweet at me at Loudmouth MMA. You can find me on Facebook. My name on there is Kyle Taylor Steele. My middle name is Taylor, Taylor. Kyle Taylor Steele. You can add me on there. Whatever. There's a Loudmouth MMA Facebook page as well. Reach out to me. Tell me that I'm wrong. That's fine. But I believe that is a suable defense, that she could come out and say, I lost this exposure, that had this fight happened, I would have gotten this exposure, and this exposure I believe is worth this, and this is the calculation that we use to get to that number. And you can submit that and again, potentially sue her. So that's what I'm doing. I am figuring out how to go about that. I don't think she will, because I think she will get blacklisted by other fighters as well. I think the honorable thing is what people are going to want her to do, which is lick your wounds and move on, and hopefully fight her in the future and just use that anger to beat her in the future. And they may not fight in the future, because I think Alexa Grasso is gonna have to move up to 125. So maybe they won't fight again unless Claudia goes up. But it's a bad situation for multiple reasons. One, again, Alexa could have potentially hurt herself. Clearly, she's having some type of, if you're to believe her story, she's having issues cutting that weight. And not only that, it was, I believe Aunt Flo was in town as well, which I guess isn't helping. But that's happened to other fighters as well. Sometimes that's used as an excuse to miss the weight. Sometimes it isn't. So I don't know. I one of three things happened, right? She either cut until she couldn't cut anymore. She had some type of medical thing happen last minute that prevented it, or she decided she wasn't really going to try to cut that hard to get the W, and then just overshot, just wound up missing it by a lot more than she intended. Maybe due to a combination of all three of those things. I don't know, but that's where I'm at with it. So that was the thing that happened before the fight. You also had another fight that got booted off the card a couple days prior. It was Grant Dawson and Chaz Skelly. I'm of the understanding that Grant Dawson is the one that pulled out, not because he wanted to, but because there was some type of USADA issue. I don't believe he has a failed drug test, but I think there is, or at least not in the traditional sense. I think there's a question mark that came up that is being evaluated as a potential link to something. I don't know the ins and outs here, but that fight was removed. That was a big fight. I was really looking forward to watching that. I think a lot of hardcore fans were also looking forward to watching that. But here's the thing. Both of those fights get canceled. What I'll say is this. It didn't matter. This card exists for one reason and one reason only. and that was Conor McGregor. And I hate to sound like a broken record, but it's true. Without Conor McGregor on this card, this is a glorified fight night. This is not a pay-per-view. For real. If you remove Conor McGregor and Donald Cerrone from this card, imagine if that happened last minute. McGregor slips walking up to the stage. Is this still a pay-per-view? I mean, there's no way. There's no way this is still a pay-per-view. And how many people can you do that with? I don't think you could do that with nobody. You can't do that with anybody else. Create a card where if one fight is removed, the thing is no longer a pay-per-view. It's John Jones, maybe Khabib Tony. If that fight gets removed, maybe. I don't know. But most of these cards, you got to go by the rule of two. You got to have a main that's worth something, and you got to have a co-main or at least something else on the main card that's worth something good, and then you can make a pay-per-view out of it. I don't remember what UFC 206 was, right? But I remember a lot of us were upset about that card. It wound up being, of course, one of the best cards we've seen in a while. But I remember at the time the sentiment was, this shouldn't be a pay-per-view. You know, this is a fight night card. Why is this a pay-per-view? Why do I got to pay $60 or $55 or whatever it was back then? Why do I got to pay that money for what is essentially a fight night card? And this is probably one of the worst examples of it. You remove Conor McGregor, Donald Cerrone off this card. The only fight that you can promote at that point, I think, is Sodiq Yusuff and Andre Fili. So the card you'd end up having is Sodiq Yusuff, Andre Fili, Diego Ferreira, Anthony Pettis, Brian Kelleher, Ode Osborne, Alexei Olenek, Maurice Green, and your headliner would be Holly Holm, Raquel Pennington. So, yeah, you tell me if that's would constitute as a pay-per-view. It wouldn't. And that's really crazy to think about, that the UFC would throw a card out there that you literally can't use as a pay-per-view if one fight is removed. It's just nuts. It's just nuts. So one of the questions that led up to this fight was, how big of a deal was the Chaz Skelly, Grant Dawson, and Kadea Grasso fight being booted from the card? And my answer has been and will be, it didn't matter one damn bit, because that's not why the card existed. The card did not exist for that. This could have had one fight on it. It would have sucked because it only lasted 40 seconds, but this card could have theoretically had one fight on it. I think it would have done basically the same. I don't think it really mattered, you know? Or you certainly didn't need any of the prelims. You could have taken the best fights off the prelims, mixed them with the best fights on the main event, and the main card, had Conor McGregor, Don Cerrone headline it, had a 6-bout, 5-bout, whatever card total, right? You don't even have the 11 bouts. You just literally have those 5 or 6 that are on the main card, and the card would have done exactly the same, right? Nothing would have changed. It wouldn't have gone down, and I don't know. A lot of these fight cards are main event driven, and a lot of the fight cards are, main and co-main driven. But I've just never seen it where it's this glaring. You know, where it's this in your face that this card exists because of literal one fight. And I really thought, to go to reference segment 1, I just truly believed that the UFC was missing its mark here, that they were putting so much reliance in the Conor name, maintaining what it had maintained, right? Or maintaining what it had maintained. Maintaining what it had been, I should say. That the Conor name had not been depleted by the loss to Khabib Nurmagomedov. That the name had not been depleted by the loss to Floyd Mayweather. I understand he fought him, but he still lost, and he lost in prime time, right? That those losses, and that mixed with the fact that before that he had beaten Eddie Alvarez, and before that he had beaten Nate Diaz, but kind of eked by, and before that he had lost to Nate the first time around, but that's going back pretty far, right? He had a long layoff prior to Khabib. He had a decently long layoff going into this one. I was like, man, they are relying so heavily, so heavily on him getting this. And I think they're missing the mark. And my God, was I wrong. I was so incredibly wrong. It's not even funny. After we come back from our break here, I'm going to actually go into the UFC 246 card. That'll kick us into the next segment. and I will probably talk about that for about 15 minutes, and then we'll take our one more break, and then I'll end on who knows what, right? We're just kind of figuring this out as we go along. Once again, I want to remind everybody, please, please, please check out the other shows on the network. We got some fantastic shows. You will love them if you check them out. So yeah, let's take a little break real quick. All right. Appreciate you guys hanging on here, all right? All right. So UFC 246, okay? I got into all the pre-stuff. I ranted about the card itself not being very full. We talked about, in the first segment, the difference between UFC 245 and 246, even though 245 was a better card, and I think a significantly better card all the way around, how big of a difference the numbers were. And I've given some of the fights on this card. But let's get into the whole thing, shall we? The first fight of the night was Sabina Mazo taking on J.J. Aldrich. I believe Sabina was a underdog in this fight. I'm almost positive. Let me pull her up real quick. She was an underdog, I'm almost positive, and she was pretty highly played on DraftKings. I'm a DraftKings player. I did not have any exposure to her, and in fact, because I won a lot of money on DraftKings this week, had I switched her out with one of my favorites. She was a slight favorite, actually. Slight favorite, -130, but I think she was an underdog on DraftKings, which I think is why so many people ended up playing her. But she won by split decision against J.J. Aldrich. I actually thought she won pretty fully. That was one of those split decisions that I think makes it appear as if that fight was closer than it was. I don't think it was. I even think it was a close fight, but I think Sabina clearly won the fight. Pretty good fight. Active. This Sabina Mazo girl, I think, is going to be awesome. So far in the UFC, I want to say she's 3-0. Let me look. She is 2-1. She lost her first fight against Marina Moroz. And then she beat Shanda Dobson. But beating J.J. Aldrich is a big win. And again, she looked good doing it. So, second fight of the night was Alexa Kamer. He's an Ohio boy. I'm an Ohio boy. I think he's out towards Cleveland. But he did fight my boy Justin Ledet. Justin Ledet, friend of the podcast. The issue with this fight is just simply Ledet, I think, is a little too one-dimensional for this weight class. I actually liked the move down to 205 because I felt like he has an 80-inch reach and he's like 6'1". And it's nice being at 205 with those kind of, features. And he lost that speed advantage that he had, I think, at heavyweight. I think he had a significant speed advantage. He most certainly had a significant cardio advantage at heavyweight, but he didn't have the power advantage. And can you imagine a guy like Ledet in there with Ngannou? That's just, I don't want to see that. So, the 205 move does make sense, but now you're with more athletic people that are faster, and a lot of them are just as big as you are. Maybe they don't got the reach, maybe not quite as tall, but they're just as big for all intents and purposes, right? And I think it's just not translating over super well. And then with Ledet too, he's a little too slow of a starter. He has very, very good cardio, and I don't know if he doesn't trust it or what, but he's just a little too slow to get going, That said, there's an argument to be made that he won this fight. I'm okay with the decision. It was not a bad decision by any stretch of the imagination. It was a perfectly fine decision. But there is, I think, if I'd be interested in seeing what MMA Decisions has this as, and I can check that in a second. But I just think, Alexa Kamer looked like he was doing more, and it looked like when he did land stuff, it landed with more power. So I think that's the reason why he got the win, and I'm totally cool with that because I think that makes sense. That's a perfectly fine metric. On MMA Decisions, only one person picked Ledet, and in fact, the mass majority of people had 30-27 Kamer. So I'm there too. I do not disagree with that decision whatsoever. I think Ledet was doing more things. It just didn't look like it. I think if you go back and watch the fight, you'll see what I'm talking about. It's like he was actually more active. It just didn't look like it. It was kind of weird. And he was landing some decently significant stuff, especially with the jab and whatnot. So I don't know. I will say this: Alexei Kammer came into this fight with a lot of hype. If he fights like that again, he ain't winning. I mean, Ledet's pretty one-dimensional. I think he should have been able to do more than that, given the hype he had coming in. But he stuck around. His cardio was dying on him, and he was still able to hang in there with Ledet, who looked like he could have gone 10 more rounds, which is kind of my point. I think Ledet, if he gets a chance to fight in the UFC again, I don't think he will. But if he does, and I'm really, really, really hoping he does, and I'm hoping to put that out into the world, what I would really like to see from sitting in my chair at home, right, as a non-fighter, what I would really like to see is just open up more. I'd love to see... get it to where you're deep breathing at the end of the second round, because there's no point in finishing the third round and not being tired. If you're not tired by the end of the third, it means you could have done a lot more. So I don't know, maybe let the hands go, start dropping around, bobbing, weaving, jumping in, really, really trying to use that striking and land as many punches as you can. I think if he kept throwing shots the entire time, he wouldn't have lost. I mean, there'd been no way. But I understand he's in a fight. There's other things he's got to worry about. I got all that. Drew Dober, Nasrat Hakparast. I always struggle with that name. I was on the MMA Sweat Show, or DFS Sweat Show, this week, which Sean I has. I had a good team this week on DraftKings, so I figured I'd call in because I was having the DFS sweat. But I thought Drew Dober would win. I think Sean thought Drew Dober was going to win. It seemed like a lot of people were thinking Drew Dober was going to win. And I think he was a decently sized underdog going into this fight. And Sean said something, and it was so funny. He was a plus 265, so a pretty decent little underdog here. And I will say Drew Dober wound up getting performance of the night for this fight. But with Drew Dober, I think a lot of us thought he was going to win here, yet he was such a big underdog. And Sean said something really funny, and he's absolutely correct. He said, people just keep betting on Nasrat because he looks like Kelvin Gastelum. And I was just thinking, that can't be it. But what else is it? Why else does everyone keep going on? I swear to God, he's right. It's because he looks like Kelvin Gastelum. Askar Askarov versus Tim Elliott. Askar Askarov got the win there. Again, no surprise here. Tim Elliott is a very weird, very funky guy. He hung in there. There are moments that he was winning. He could have won the fight, if a couple, doesn't get taken down in one round or doesn't get as many punches landed, whatever. It was a relatively back and forth. It was a unanimous decision for Askar Askarov, but, Tim Elliott was in there the whole time. At no point was he really out of it. So, But again, this was really no real surprise. Sodiq Yusuff got the win over Andre Fili. Very, very good back and forth. Absolutely incredible first round. But Sodiq Yusuff did what he does and showed why the hype is there, and again, why people were picking him to win that fight. The big surprise of the card for a lot of people. I played her on DraftKings. I for whatever reason, I liked her in this fight. I never would have imagined she would have won. But, I liked her in this fight, and I knew that there was a pathway for her to win, to basically just eke out a really ugly decision. But Roxanne Modafferi getting the win over the hype machine, the future, Macy Barber. And I want to talk about one thing with Macy Barber. Before I get there, kudos to Roxanne Modafferi. She's taken a lot of shit from the MMA community. She's very, very nice. She hasn't taken a lot of shit for that, but she's just not very good, and she's very weird, and it's just like, I don't know. It's Roxanne Modafferi. I don't dislike her, but I don't know, she's 24-16 or 20 at the time, 23-16. I don't know. I'm just whatever. What is there to be uber impressed about? But she's obviously in her later years has got a lot better at MMA. She's had a couple big wins now in the UFC. So I don't know. She's here. She's here to stay. That's a huge win over Macy Barber. And if you want to talk about the knee, then feel free to talk about the knee, my friend. That rhymed. Talk about the knee all you want. But there's a reason why it got blown out. She got blown out because she got punched in the face and it wobbled her leg. So, yeah, she tore her knee, but she also lost the first round. And then she tore her knee off of a punch, which means Roxanne's the one who tore her knee. Macy didn't tear her knee. Roxanne tore Macy's knee, right? So I think that's a thing we got to remember here. Could she have won the fight had she not torn her knee? Probably. I don't know, maybe. But she got dominated in the first round, and she got dropped the very, very beginning of the second round. So I don't know. I don't know if she could have. It just seemed like Roxanne was there and firing on all cylinders. After the fight, this is when the real issue starts here. Macy Barber grabs the damn microphone like it's Kanye West at the Grammy Awards, wherever it was, when he stole the mic from Taylor Swift. And I don't think Macy was trying to be shitty. I don't think that's what was going on here. I don't think she was trying to step on Roxanne's moment. I don't think that's where she was coming from. But that's exactly what she did. And at that point, I don't know if intentions really matter, because you stomped all over Roxanne's moment. And then she made some little offhanded comment. And again, I don't think she was trying to be mean, but she made some offhanded comment about how she's not even going to apologize for her performance because it allowed Roxanne to shine. Get off the mic. Get off the mic. You don't need to say that. Take your loss. You lost. Okay? Go get your knee fixed. Sit out 6 to 9 months while it heals. And come back and start winning fights again. There's no reason for you to grab the mic when you just not only lost the fight, but got absolutely, unequivocally dominated for 3 consecutive rounds nearly the entire time. Okay? There's no... Get away from the microphone. Get away from the microphone. I thought that was a really shitty thing for her to do. I don't think she's apologized for it. She really should, because it was a really... it was a very rude thing to do on many levels. Who else on the... I know Roxanne didn't get a performance bonus. She got the old snub, but I believe somebody else on the prelims got Brian Kelleher for his knockout over Ode Osborne. But that was on the main card. So yeah, nobody else in the prelims got a performance bonus besides Drew Dober. Main card real quick, and I think we'll probably spend actually the last segment here. We'll just talk about Conor McGregor, Donald Cerrone. So let's get through the main card real quick. Diego Ferreira, Anthony Pettis. Listen, Anthony Pettis struggles when he's facing a pressure fighter. The more pressure you put on the guy, the worse he's going to do. That's why, stylistically speaking, someone like Wonder Boy was actually kind of perfect for Pettis. I know that's hindsight, but someone who's not putting a lot of pressure on you is actually kind of good for him because it gives him the chance to do more stuff. And I don't think he's as, well, I don't want to say scared, but yeah, he just doesn't do well with the pressure fights. Diego Ferreira is a pressure fighter. End of story. I mean, that's exactly what it looked like. Anthony Pettis was a fish out of water on ground with Ferreira. Yeah, there's nothing else to be said. Kelleher, I think this was a huge win for him. Huge win. He tends to get these staple wins. And there's something to be said about a fighter who, yeah, maybe he'll lose on the undercard. Maybe he'll lose every couple of fights or whatever. But boy, when it counts, when your back's against the wall, when you're on the big stage, you win fights. And that seems to be Brian Kelleher. And there's something to be said about that. So kudos to that man right there for getting the wins that he needs to get to continue his UFC career. He ain't getting kicked out of the UFC now, and I think he was probably on his way there. So kudos to him. Nothing to take away from there. Alexei Olenek taking Maurice Green, one of the coolest fights you're going to see. If you haven't got a chance to watch that fight, go watch it. It's wild. Maurice Green drops Alexei Olenek, with the first punch. It looks like that's where it's going. Olenek is trying to squeeze Maurice Green's head off. He's just moving all around him and grabbing different limbs and necks and heads, and finally gets to the arm bar. I believe he broke Maurice Green's arm, or at least dislocated. That's how the fight ended. And then we get to Holly Holm, Raquel Pennington. This was the second time they fought. They fought early on to a split decision. I believe might have been Holly Holm's debut fight. Holly Holm clearly won this fight, but I mean, it wasn't fun. It was not a fun fight. But I will say Raquel Pennington did not take her loss very gracefully. She tweeted or Instagrammed or whatever it was, the fact that she didn't want to go into the fight to be hugged the whole time. Didn't want to be hugged the whole time. Cool, Rocky. That's like, again, and I think John Franklin tweeted this off the network here. Go check him out on his shows. On this network, you got... he's on Early Stoppage. He does one of the recap shows. What else does John do? It does all angles whenever that show's on. But anyway, John, great guy, John Franklin. Check him out on Twitter, Sunday Morning Corner Man. I think he tweeted that's like that's like a grappler saying, "Why didn't go in there to get punched in the face the whole time?" It's like, no shit, you didn't want to go in there to get that, but that's the way it happened, and it's your fault for not being better in the area that you need to be better in. So, all right, let's get into our next little break here. We will see you around the bend, and we'll talk about the main event. Thank you. Thank you again for sticking around. I've had a really good time. I've been recording for 45 minutes. I haven't stopped. I enjoy this. I could do this. Well, I am going to do it every week. Not just that I can, but I want to do this every week. So here we go. Last little segment here. I'll be here for another 10 minutes or so, which is a perfect amount of time to talk about Conor McGregor, Donald Cerrone. I'm not going to go into a full breakdown of this fight. We did on the Not Safe for Work MMA show this week, if you don't mind, a lot of cussing and just horrible words being used and descriptions of things and just various whatever. If you're into that and if that doesn't bother you, you can go check out the Not Safe for Work MMA show. We did watch this fight. It's only 40 seconds. We watched the fight and we kind of broke down what was happening. I'm not going to really go into that. And I also am going to fight the urge, because I do have the urge to talk about those shoulder strikes. But I feel like every MMA media member is that's all they're talking about this week. So I'm not going to talk about them, okay? But just know that I want to, and just know that it happened. Conor McGregor looked essentially like the Conor McGregor of old. He went out there, and the first thing he did was overstep on a big punch, a big left, overstepped on it. Cerrone ducked it, and he kind of ate a bit of a knee or a hip, and then that's where they clenched, and then the shoulder strikes happened. And then they disengaged. Conor went to kick, or Donald Cerrone went to kick Conor in the face. I guess I am breaking down the fight. It's really short, and I remember the whole thing. Cerrone went to kick Conor in the face. Missed, or got blocked by Conor. He blocked with his arm and then immediately threw a counter kick, I believe left-footed, smacked Donald Cerrone in the face. Cerrone goes down, or gets wobbled, I should say, and then McGregor, in very typical McGregor fashion, then throws punch over and over again. Does not miss. I think he even got a knee in there at some point. What's amazing about Conor, and when you go back and you watch his career, and you go back and you watch his fights, early on, right? Early UFC, like Marcus Brimage and Seaver and whatever, when he gets people in trouble, Chad Mendez, another perfect example, Dustin Poirier, all of them. It's literally every fight you can see what I'm talking about. When he gets people hurt and they drop down to the ground or they slump or they get dazed or whatever, he does not miss. And it's just insane. It's insane, his ability to follow you down, which I guess is a reason why someone like Khabib is a bit of an issue, right? Because if you'd say you do knock Khabib down, you kind of got to back up. You can't really follow him down and land punch after punch because he can grab a hold of you and do some shit, and you don't want that. And you saw that with Nate Diaz, right? When he'd knock him down, he just kind of back up, Now, maybe because Diaz was never as hurt as Cerrone was when he took that kick. He got butt planted a couple times, but he was still cognizant. He wasn't real daisy or anything. So maybe that's why, I guess. Maybe I'm not making the point I thought I was making, and I'm realizing that in real time. But I still think someone like Khabib is going to be a big issue. Even if you do really rock Khabib, man, I would be so cautious and weary of following him down to the ground and landing these punches. I would not feel terribly comfortable with that. So, it's an amazing thing that Conor's able to do. I don't know why he's so good at it. I don't know where he gets that from. I have no idea. But he just becomes a bloodhound when he gets people hurt and will land shot after shot after shot. whether you're standing, crouching, sitting, leaning, running away, doesn't matter. He will land those shots, period, every time. Incredible accuracy, timing, the whole shebang. So the big question about Conor at this point is what's next? Let's get this kind of thing out of the way. Beating Cerrone, and this is, I'm just kind of repeating stuff that everybody already knows. But beating Cerrone isn't that big of a deal. It's just not, okay? It's not that big of a deal. But the way he beat him, and I think that's what's important. If you're one of those people who is just dismissing this, don't dismiss this. Beating Cerrone is not all that big of a deal for Conor. Not at this point, okay? Cerrone's coming off of consecutive knockout losses. Beating him and knocking him out, really, is not that big of a deal, okay? He should have taken the Gaethje fight. I'm 100% on board. If you're one of those people and you're naysaying this and you're downplaying it, I'm on your side, okay? I'm team whatever your name is. I get it. But you cannot forget the way that Conor McGregor won the fight. He won the fight the way you're supposed to win if you're fighting someone you're not supposed to fight. Now, if you fight someone you're not supposed to fight and then you eke out a decision or you lose a round or there's a bunch of back and forth or it lingers on for too long, then I got it. I'm with you at that point. Man, not only should you not have fought the guy, but you didn't even look all that good doing it. I 100%, I'm on board. If that's what was going on, then sure. But that isn't what was going on here, okay? He came in there and absolutely disposed of Cerrone. He landed shoulder strikes, punches, and kicks, and a knee or two, and disposed of him in 40 seconds. So if you're sitting there going, yeah, but beating Cerrone doesn't mean anything, you're wrong. You're just wrong because you have to take into account the way that he won. So what's next for Conor McGregor, right? I think there's 3 options, 4 options maybe. We'll go through all 4. We only have a couple minutes left. Maybe we'll talk about more of this next week in a segment. I don't know. We'll figure it out. I'm just figuring this out as I go along. There's 4 options for Conor, okay? Conor can fight Jorge Masvidal for the bad mother effer belt, okay? Number 2, he can fight Nate Diaz for a 3rd time. That seems to be the least sexy of options, but as long as Nate Diaz is still alive and Conor McGregor is still alive, the trilogy fight is always on the table, and you're fooling yourself if you think it's not. He can fight Justin Gaethje, which myself and many others believe that's who he should have fought anyway. There seems to be a lot of smoke there. Gaethje's game. Gaethje probably won't try to take him down. It'll be a fun back and forth. I'm all about it. Gaethje hits hard. I'm all about that fight, right? Or the 4th option is the Khabib rematch. So let me rank those real quick and what I think is the most what's the word I'm looking for here? Oh my gosh. I'm blanking out entirely. I should delete this out, but I'm not going to. Likely. Holy cow. That word just escaped me. What I think is the most likely. Let me rank those real quick. I think the number 1 most likely fight is Jorge Masvidal. I don't know why, but I think that's the most likely fight. I think the 2nd most likely fight is Khabib, the Khabib rematch. I think that's the 2nd most likely fight. I think the 3rd most likely fight, and I'm going to cheat a little bit after this one, but I think the 3rd most likely fight is Justin Gaethje. I think that's the 3rd most likely fight. Again, there's a lot of smoke there. Gaethje's doing everything the right way. He's still talking the whole shebang. He ain't scared about the way Conor beat Cowboy. He wants that fight like everybody does. The 4th most likely fight, there's only one fight left, and that's the Nate Diaz trilogy. But I'll say this. I think what's more likely than that, I'll say, is option E, which is a different fight. Conor fights an Usman, or Conor fights, I don't know, like a I don't think a Frankie's possible, but you know what I mean? Something that isn't being discussed, I think, is more likely than Conor fighting Nate next. I just think that fight does not have a whole lot of sexy flair right now. If Diaz can get back in the octagon and get a big win, all of a sudden that looks a lot sexier again. But as of right now, it doesn't. It seems like Conor is still in his prime, and it seems like Nate Diaz is starting to, he's starting to slow down a wee bit here. Although I don't know if losing to Masvidal is, I don't know. Masvidal's really good, and he looked better than Ben Askren. You know what I mean? And a couple other fighters who fought Jorge Masvidal recently. So, but yeah, I don't think that's the fight. I don't think that's all that interesting. I'm not all about that. So that's it. We reached the end of it. Do you want me to do a real quick ranking? I'll do a real quick one. I got 40 seconds left. Let me hit you with what I want to see. Okay, it's not going to be the same order. I think the fight I want to see the most is the Khabib rematch. I think Conor's still in his prime. I think Khabib is still whatever. I still think Conor can win that fight. I'm worried if this lingers into next year that something might happen and Conor can't get the fight or won't win the fight. So, and I don't want Conor to lose in the meantime and take some air away. So I still want to see that fight. I got 15 seconds left. That's my favorite fight to see. Number 2, I'm going to go Jorge Masvidal. I'm going to go Justin Gaethje for number 2, actually. Number 3, I'm going to go Jorge Masvidal. Number 4, I'm going to go with the Nate Diaz trilogy. And then 5, I'll go with something random. Thank you guys for tuning in. See you next week.